So we have been exploring the wisdom traditions, and the first Sunday this month we took a look at the heart, the mystical heart of Christianity. The Christianity beyond dogma, the Christianity that really was about the teachings of the master teacher Jesus, not about churchianity, not about the Apostle Paul, but more about the mystical heart of Christianity and trying to reclaim some of that. And then last week we looked at the wisdom in the Eastern paths and traditions. And in both cases we were looking at and seeing a reflection of our own teachings and practices in unity. And as I've shared before, the closer we get to the heart of any of the religious traditions, the closer they are to each other. That when we are at the surface, when we are at the circumference of the teachings, they can look very different and sound very different and feel very different. But when we get to the real core, the real golden nugget, if you will, they become much closer to each other, hence the idea of this universality of spirituality. And today we want to look at the teachings from Indigenous cultures and to honor and acknowledge some of what we hold to be true today in our practice and our teachings of unity. Because truly we find roots of what we stand for and believe in those traditions. It is true that Indigenous peoples around the world are incredibly diverse, and yet there is a core set, if you will, of values and themes that they seem to all hold near and dear. Themes of the idea of the importance of community, of genuine relationship, themes and ideas around reciprocity, and not just reciprocity between people, but the stewardship nature of reciprocity to the earth itself. And the idea of respect, of walking our journey of life with respect for one another, and especially doing so in those times where it is pretty difficult to do so. So I would say that today we have the opportunity really to dig in and practice, do we not? To dig in and practice. And so Indigenous peoples around the world share certain core values and teachings, and in many of them is this idea or this echo, we would also say, of earth spirituality, recognizing that this place that we call home, this planet that we call home, is sacred, and we haven't always treated it with the kind of sacred respect that it really needs and really deserves if it is to be preserved. So I want to share just 3 themes with you that I think can be found in the Indigenous cultures and teachings. The first theme being this, and it is a theme we explored when we were looking at the Eastern paths and traditions. It's another one of those universal themes. The theme of interconnectedness. Interconnectedness, say that with me. Interconnectedness, the theme of interconnectedness. It's also phrased in some Indigenous cultures as the idea of all my relations. Say that with me. All my relations. Think about that for a moment and feel into that for a moment. All my relations. As I say that, it feels almost like a warm blanket I'm just wrapping around myself. All my relations. All my relations. Wrapped in that idea of all my relations, the idea of our interconnectedness with all of life, is a holistic worldview. A holistic worldview, recognizing that humans are not separate from nor superior to nature. We're not separate from it, nor are we superior to nature, but are an intricate part of it, A kinship, this idea that all of life is part of my family. It looks very different, some aspects of it very, very different. But when I approach life, when I approach the world as if all are my relations, all our kin, it affects the way I choose to do things. It impacts my life choice and my lifestyle. To treat all with dignity, to treat all with respect, to treat all with gentleness. The All My Relations philosophy is connected to the Sioux Nation, to many of the indigenous nations or indigenous tribes here in our country. And what I think is important, it was not just a saying. It was a way of living, a way of being. Sometimes in our practice, I think, of New Thought or of metaphysics, we know the words and we can get very cliche with them and we can just rattle them off, but it's not enough to know them. We've got to live our lives as if we are embodying them. And so for many of these indigenous peoples, this was not just something that they talked about, but a way that they lived. I remember a certain maturation in my own spiritual journey. I don't remember exactly when it happened. It was quite some time ago, though. But part of my own maturation was this moving into spiritual practice and teaching being not just for me, and not just for getting my life to be happier, more healthy, or more abundant, or more joyous. It was that, and it was about the other. It was about expanding my circle of care and concern, about realizing the interconnectedness of me with you, the interconnectedness of me with all. And that maturation, for me, led to certain kinds of lifestyle changes, certain kinds of ways of thinking about things and making choices in life. It's not always easy because it's almost counterculture if you're doing any of what it is that I'm pointing to here. It's almost counterculture because we're not really taught to live as if all our family, all our kin. Chief Seattle said, "Humankind is not woven the web of life. We are but one thread in it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves." That's a really profound idea, is it not? Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things connect. Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, who were the co-founders of the Unity movement, Unity began in the late 1800s. They studied world religions pretty deeply, especially for that time. And they studied not only the Eastern traditions, they also studied some of the Native American traditions and beliefs and practices. And I don't know whether Charles and Myrtle borrowed specifically from them, but I know that they were influenced by them. Charles believed and taught that there is intelligence and life in all manifestations of creation, that there is intelligence and life, not knowledge the way we think of it, but intelligence, the spark of the divine in every manifestation, in every form of life. He wrote, "Intelligence is inherent in every form, animate or inanimate," and that he emphasized that we should be speaking words of truth to everything. And then Myrtle, as a little girl, was sometimes accused of being a nature worshiper. She said, "Nature is surely the glorified face of God." She felt that whenever she was out in nature, and maybe some of you feel the same way, that she was maybe a little bit closer to God, a little bit closer to the divine. There's a pretty common, I don't know who to attribute it to, but a pretty common proverb or teaching among ancient indigenous peoples. Treat the earth well. It was not given to you by your parents. It was loaned to you by your children. Treat the earth well. It was not given to you by your parents. It was loaned to you by your children. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. That implies, to me anyway, tremendous responsibility. Right? Tremendous responsibility. And it begins with just opening our eyes and pondering that and asking ourselves, do we believe that to be true? And I think most reasonable people would admit, yeah, that is true. That is true. We are borrowing it from our children. And then those of us who are on any sort of spiritual path, I think then come to the next logical step, if you will, of saying, well, if that is true, then how does that inform or shape how I choose to walk this journey of life? You know, do I walk in wisdom? Do I walk in peace? Do I walk in joy? Do I walk in love? Do I serve in these ways? So the interconnectedness, this idea of all our kin, all my relations. The second idea of the three is this idea of enoughness. Enoughness, say that with me. Enoughness. It's another way of saying stewardship, but I like the word enoughness. Enough. Enough. That means, it doesn't mean living without, right? It doesn't mean sacrificing. It doesn't mean not having what you need to have, but it also doesn't mean greed and gluttony, right? Enoughness. Turn that word over in your own mind for a few moments. Enoughness. What does that feel like to you? What would that really look like to you in the living of your individual life? I think many of us would say we are already there and have been there for some time. And if we are already there and have been there for some time, then how do we steward and share what it is that we have out of that sense of enoughness? The lesson that we can gain from many indigenous cultures is this, that true abundance is not defined by accumulation. I know there was a time that if you had asked me, I would have said things or thought things like, well, yes, you know if you're abundant by what you got. Maybe some of you also experienced or felt that way or believed that way at some point in your journey. But true abundance is not defined by accumulation, but by generosity, long-term vision, and living in reciprocity, the idea of not taking more than what you need, not using more than what you need. And I am not here to pass judgment on anyone or to say, I'm looking at you, I'm looking at me, and asking, where am I in that? And what I believe to be true is that to the extent that each of us take our own responsibility and are accountable to looking inside ourselves and asking ourselves, well, where am I with this enoughness? And where am I in this idea of not taking more than what I really need and giving back from whatever excess I have? To me, it really matches or aligns with a much more mature understanding of our teachings of abundance in unity and in New Thought. The idea of a mature understanding of abundance and what we might also call responsible manifestation. In metaphysics and unity and New Thought and science of mind, we teach that God is unlimited. We don't teach that it is a virtue to be poor. We don't make people feel guilty for having and enjoying abundance. But we also realize that this abundance is meant to flow through us and not stop with us. To flow through us and not stop with us. Life works in a circular fashion. Talked about this a little bit, I don't know if it was last week or a couple of weeks ago. The idea of circulation, that even in our bodies, when our blood is not circulating properly, when our breath is not in this rhythm and flow, that there is dis-ease that we feel or dis-ease on its way, that there is an ebb and there is a flow, that yes, the universe, God, source is unlimited, but it's meant to flow through us and not stop with us. The way that we look at this is that we are guided by this sense of responsibility and this sense of community. This sense that I want you to do well. I want you to have the things that you need. And I know that this is not a zero-sum game. That shifts the way we look at each other. It shifts the way we handle things. In some of the indigenous cultures, this idea is expressed in the seventh generation concept, the idea that any decision on what is used and what is done is looked through the lens of how does it affect the seventh generation out. Can you imagine for a moment if we as a nation and if our corporations as businesses were held to that way of looking? Do you think anything would change in the world? You're awfully quiet. It would change dramatically, and I think it would change for the good. I know it would change for the good if we had a much longer term view. Indigenous peoples seem to really have that, and perhaps because they lived more closely to the rhythms of nature and the rhythms of life, and they recognize that their very survival was tied to that. A long-term view. How does this decision that I am about to make, or that we in this community are about to make, or we in this church, or we in this state, or we in this country are about to make, how does it impact the seventh generation? What was the quote I read earlier? Treat the earth well. It was not given to you by your parents. It was loaned to you by your children. That's the seventh generation idea. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. When you borrow something, what do you feel obligated to do? To take care of it, and then what? To return it, right? You take care of it and you return it. It's the right thing to do. It's the moral thing to do. There's a Cree teaching, when all the trees have been cut down, when all the animals have been hunted, when all the waters are polluted, when all the air is unsafe to breathe, only then will you discover you cannot eat money. Right? Is that not true? No matter where we stand, in our political views, it's true. I guess you could chew a dollar bill. I don't think it would taste very good, and I don't think 100 would taste any better than $1, right? Right? And the third is the beautiful moral and ethical guidance that was held by many of our Indigenous brothers and sisters. I'm going to, a little sidebar here. I serve now on the Unity World Headquarters Board of Directors, and it is a joy to be serving there. I was there all this past week. And one of our other board members is actually a member of the Chippewa Nation. And what is beautiful about having her in our presence is it's so easy for us sometimes in our work around diversity to think of diversity more tied to black and white, to brown people and black people. And sometimes we completely forget that there's a history as older than that history of our Indigenous brothers and sisters. And Reverend Carol Scotta will gently remind us of that from time to time. And so I think there's a richness of having her in our board, on our board. Anyway, the third and final point or theme I want to share is the theme of moral and ethical guidance. And sometimes it's referred to the 7 grandfather teachings. Isn't that a beautiful way of saying it? The 7 grandfather teachings. And they included these practices, and they're practices that I think any spiritual tradition would say they are in alignment with. 7 values. The first one being love. Being love. Living from that understanding that we are all connected, and when we live from that understanding, the way that we embody that is through love, not just through a theoretical or philosophical concept, but through love, respect, treating others and the world we live in with respect, treating it the way we would want to be treated ourselves. The value of bravery, to face the foe with integrity, is to know bravery, standing up for what is right. You and I have the opportunity during these times that I think are still challenging for us to stand up for what we believe is spiritually, ethically, and morally right. We don't have to have a microphone. We don't have to speak in a loud and nasty way, but to speak clearly for what we think is right, to give voice and help to amplify the voices that maybe are too quiet or too afraid to speak up. Truth was the 4th one, to be faithful to your own teachings, your own values. The 5th was honesty, to walk with integrity, to be honest in all your relations, to be honest with what you say, to be honest with what you commit to have your word be your word. The 6th being humility, to know yourself as a sacred part of this web of life, neither greater than nor less than, to walk with humility. I think of teachers that I have studied, teachers like Thich Nhat Hanh, teachers like the Dalai Lama, and in some way, we might hold them as these great figures, and they, in my opinion, are or were great figures, but to be in their presence, they make you feel like the one that is great. True humility, knowing that we are equal to all others. And last, wisdom. Wisdom. We could use some wisdom today. We could definitely use some wisdom today. And one of the things that we emphasize in Unity is that a gift of practicing stillness and silence, reflection, meditation, is that it clears away the mud. You know that saying in the Tao, do you have the patience to wait until the mud settles and the water becomes clear? To do these practices so that our own deep wisdom comes forth and through. We are connected, we believe in New Thought, we are connected to divine mind, to the one mind, the mind of God, the mind, the intelligence, if you will, of the universe itself. But we get in our own way with our doubts and our fears and our unfinished business and our busyness, the craziness, the monkey mind. But as we learn to become more quiet, as we learn to become more still, as we go to that place of that beautiful song that Shane sang right before the message, we then touch our own wisdom, and we can sit in community with one another and share it, and in community can be about making the world a better place, the world a better place. And so let me close with one last thing, and it is the suggestion that maybe you hold in practice for, a few days, a week, whatever, asking yourself how the things you are doing will affect your grandchildren's grandchildren, whether you have them or not. Namaste.